8th. Oh, that's right. Good evening and welcome to the October 8th, 2020 Local Planning Agency meeting. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chair Strom,
Here.
Vice Chair Roberts,
I'm here.
Board Member Herbach,
Yes, so here.
Board Member Massing, Board Member Rich,
Here.
Board Member Mathers, Board Member Talavega.
Thank you. Will you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting? No minutes. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. That'll be next meeting. Do we have any comments from the public on any non-agenda items? Seeing none in person, are there any on Zoom?
Raise hand if any comments, please.
Okay, seeing none, thank you. Are there any comments from board members?
Yes,
Mike, go ahead.
I have distributed copies of the 1994 City Advisory Board, a local planning agency, rules and regulations, along with the proposed new bylaws of the local planning agency.
Christina,
Okay.
can you, they froze, didn't they?
I think so. Either that or reading.
No, they froze.
Yeah. So maybe I could text Kev. Or maybe-
Whatever. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Can you hear us?
I can't see anything.
It's gone now.
Yeah, they're gone.
The city commissioners want to adopt the bylaws for all of the boards in their reorg meeting in December. So they are going to visit them. But I think, by the way, we haven't figured out how to handle this yet at all. The city commission's theory on it is, what if the board decided that its bylaws said that it could override the city commission, or whatever it might be. So what'll happen is, it goes hand in hand with what Mr. Herbach wants to do, is we'll bring forward, and we could, I don't know if we want to further the discussion today or schedule it for an agenda item, but we will have you guys review the bylaws just as if it was a normal ordinance or a normal development project. And then your recommendations of what will be brought forward to the city commission for adoption in December anyway. So we're kind of hand in hand with what your proposal is. I just figured I'd kind of chatter up here and do a 2-bit for while we were waiting for Zoom to come back on.
You're back on, by the way.
We're back on.
Yeah, you're on. Good job.
Good. Okay, thanks, Mike. Are there any other board members with comments? Seeing none. We have 4 ordinance items, action items tonight. The first one is a request for continuance for the annexation of city-owned property at Haney Creek. Do we need to make a motion on that?
Yes, please, Chair.
Okay. Do we have a motion to request continuance?
I'll make the
Can
motion.
we put in that motion a date
Yeah.
certain to the 12th of November? please?
So I move for continuance of this agenda item to November 12th, 2020 at our LPA meeting.
Thank you, Lee. Do we have a second?
Second,
We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Board Member De La Vega,
Yes.
Board Member Rich,
Yes.
Board Member Herbach,
Yes.
Vice Chair Roberts,
Yes.
Chair Strom.
Yes. Item number 2, ordinance number 2 is amendment to the land development regulation for residential infill stormwater management. We'll hear from staff.
Thank you, Chair. This is ordinance 2448/2020, an ordinance of the City of Stuart, Florida, amending section 6.03.00 of the Land Development Code entitled Stormwater Management of Chapter 6 entitled On-Site and Off-Site Development Standards in respect of standards for residential, single-family and duplex infill development, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, providing for codification, and providing for an effective date and for other purposes. Staff have brought this forward primarily due to the fact we're seeing many more developments come online for residential infill lots within the City of Stuart, and some of the inherent problems and issues that we're seeing reported as they are getting constructed. So the situation in the city at the moment, we have a lot of subdivisions and communities and neighborhoods that are historic and have been built over a period of time to different standards. And when it rains, as it has been often doing recently, rain is captured on the lots and the roofs and flows to vacant infill locations. And that's one where we see stormwater being puddled and accumulating on vacant lots. New construction comes in, and due to the new flood elevation that we're applying, have been applying recently and for a few years, the new construction is built to a different elevation to existing construction and existing residences. As you would suspect, and they're usually built on a stem wall, and as you would suspect, that is then higher than the adjacent lots. We often see fill being brought in to accommodate the difference in the lot elevations. Again, storm event comes along. The water that would normally pond on the infill lot is being directed away onto neighboring lots. And all of a sudden we have flooding issues into properties that are of a lower elevation. So the code is proposing that we limit the fill, that we require guttering to roofs, that we look at infill lots in actually implementing one or more of the following: an exfiltration or French drain system, or rainwater gardens along the side boundaries. So storm events come along, the rain is captured by the guttering and then hopefully absorbed by the new stormwater systems, the exfiltration and the rainwater garden, if a rainwater garden is installed. So the other issues that we would like to see resolved as permits come through for this type of development is to have more awareness of what's going on beyond the property line that the property is being constructed on. And so we're asking that a minimum of 25 feet beyond the property lot line should be shown, which identifies existing improvements within the area of the infill lot. And the permit should be accompanied by an engineer's stormwater lot grading plan, which can be then reviewed by our consultant engineer to ensure that the stormwater is being handled correctly. The lot fill shall be limited to the minimum necessary for construction of the building. The stem wall methodology or extended footers will be mandatory. Installation of roof gutters that discharge into rain gardens and French drains will be mandatory. If the residential infill lot has a waterfront, then a buffered shoreline or other approved method for preventing excessive stormwater runoff into the water body shall be required. So that's at the interface with the lot and the water body. And that's been seen on major PUDs, and that's what's been implemented. And we think there should be some effort made if there's an infill residential going in. So that's the proposal. It's been reviewed by the building official and also the Public Works Department, and it's been a coordinated effort. And really staff has, the reasoning behind bringing this forward is the amount of complaints and issues that we deal with after the fact once construction has occurred and problems are identified. We'd like to see the identification of those problems before we issue permits.
Okay,
I'd just like to also say we have seen development that has incorporated these type of engineering solutions, and those are the type of developments that we don't get any calls on once they're built.
thanks, Kev.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any board comment?
I do.
Okay,
Yes.
go ahead.
The infill, my question is if there was an older house and they tore it down, is
They
that
would-
considered infill?
Yes.
Okay, so an
Any-
existing house removed and a new house to be built would
Yeah.
be under these rules? 'Cause it's
In
infill.
effect, it's any single family or duplex building that's built now under the new stormwater flood elevation requirements.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
A comment. Can you hear me?
I'll let her go.
Go
Yes.
ahead, Christina.
Because we are not on big. So we're noticing a lot, this is happening a lot in our neighborhood. And what we notice is they put the stem wall in and then they come back and they fill on the outside of the stem wall. So the problem still exists. You know what I mean? So even though they did the stem wall, they come back and then that backfill at the stem wall is still causing the problem.
Yep,
That's exactly the issue that we have seen.
okay,
So is that addressed in here?
Yes. This is designed to prevent this type of,
But how does that prevent this? So if I get
So-
myself approved with the stem wall,
yes,
and then a year later I come back and I dump a bunch of fill in that causes the runoff problem, what have I violated?
you've violated your site plan, which approved the exfiltration, the rainwater garden, and
After
the
after
stormwater
fact?
management plan that was, yeah.
Okay, all right.
okay, thanks, Christina. Lee?
Sure. So I had a couple comments. I'm going to the lot fill shall be limited to the minimum necessary for construction of the building. And I think minimum necessary needs some definition or some parameter. It
Agreed.
either needs who it's determined by, it needs, but I mean, it needs some clarification on that. So that's number one.
Okay.
Construction of a stem wall or extended footers or other approved method of foundation construction. I think you need another clause on there that either says to address potential runoff impacts caused by the construction or to minimize or eliminate runoff. Or
Yes.
you need something instead of just saying, here's my approved method of foundation construction. I think you need to say why you're doing that. I think that's the second thing. Installation of roof gutters that discharge into, you have rain gardens and or French drains. I think you ought to add another one that says, or another method, another approved method to capture the water.
Yep.
Whether that's a cistern, whether that's a barrel system, whether that's whatever that is. But I think it kind of, instead of just defining, here's your two ways to do it. I mean, I think there's other ways to do it besides just those two ways.
Yes.
So that's my third thing. Hang on. And you're eliminating the sentence on C that says single-family homes and duplexes on lots of record, though not required to have engineering site plans, must demonstrate by submission of a civil plan depicting that stormwater runoff will not flow onto adjoining properties.
Yes.
So I got eliminating the first part, but I think somewhere you need to add something about, that has the phrase about stormwater runoff will not flow onto adjoining properties. I think you need to capture that,
So we're-
that's,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? That's what the purpose is of this
Okay.
whole thing.
So the engineer's stormwater lot grading plan should have a phrase in there somewhere that,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
that effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's all I had.
Okay. Campbell, do you have any comments?
Kev, what's the difference in cost between the French drain and the rain garden for the builder homeowner?
Well, that depends on the design, the actual requirement to accommodate the volume of stormwater that needs to be dealt with. It can be, I don't know, I mean, it would need an engineer's probable cost to be done on the final design.
Now, does the rain garden have to be maintained by the homeowner?
Yes, it needs to be maintained to be functioning.
So if they fail to maintain it, then it would not be accomplishing
Correct.
what
Yeah.
and so how do you,
That would be a code violation, yeah.
so this is something that code enforcement has to monitor the presence of these rain gardens.
Yes.
And I think you should change the that into with.
Excuse me, and I don't know if you guys can hear me online or not, but from a standpoint of monitoring from code enforcement, this is kind of a reactionary code as it is. What we're having right now is the neighbors of these houses that have been built, that are built up high, are getting flooded. And so they're calling on a daily basis.
And no remedy, yeah.
And so if in fact someone were to fail to maintain the rain garden to the extent that it stopped percolating the water or that was causing the neighbor to flood, I suspect the first heavy rain would be a notification to the city. So it's not a situation where we're going to be out inspecting. It's going to be a situation where can two neighbors work out a deal with each other and figure it out? And if they can't, then we'll intervene.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Campbell.
Did you get my that to with?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Christina.
Does this add another layer of design to the homeowner that's going to be building? You know what I mean? Is this an extra
Yeah.
Yes.
you have to go through?
Yeah, there's an extra cost for this, no doubt.
And is
Fine.
this
Yeah.
one that-
Well,
Yes.
you either do it up front and accommodate the design before it causes an issue, or we end up having to figure out after construction how to remedy the situation, which can be a far higher cost.
So if you don't change the topography at all when you build, does this still pertain to that building?
I think if the stormwater system is designed correctly and approved through an engineer's signed and sealed stormwater grading and treatment and management plan, then obviously the building official would look at that.
So I think the whole thing is that, yeah, there's an impact for infill development, and the impact on infill development to the surrounding property owners who are already there. I mean, you already know that you're supposed to keep your water on your own property. So, but without any teeth or without anything that's kind of defining that and saying, this is what you need to do, the city's hands are tied when I call up and complain about what Ryan has
Yes.
done next door.
And
Right?
You won't call up just once. You'll make sure.
Oh, I'm going to call you every
then-
time it rains.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think in having built homes in the city and in other places like Sewell's Point, there are additional calculations you have to provide Sewell's Point to show them that you're maintaining your water on site. So the key to this whole ordinance is that engineer stormwater lot grading plan, because you'll be able to determine if it's a stem wall, what you're doing with your swales on the property line based on the topographic survey. So that is the teeth of this, is that stormwater lot grading plan. And I agree with Lee on the fill lot, that lot fill number has to be quantified, qualified some way. And really, you might be able to just go back to that engineered stormwater lot grading plan
Yes.
and take that out, because that lot grading plan is gonna show us, you know, where the burns and swales are and how the runoff's gonna be contained.
That's a good point.
Okay, so do we have a motion?
I move approval with the 4 changes. So enumerating those, the line that talks about lot fill shall be limited to minimum necessary, cleaning that up. Whether it says lot fill shall be determined by the lot grading plan, something along those lines. The second one being adding a clause on there that talks about either minimizing or eliminating runoff or addressing impacts of runoff.
Yes.
The third one, changing the word that to with and adding a third component after rain gardens and French drains that addresses another method, approved method or something of H2O,
Yes.
of water capture. And then number 4 is under C1, taking that sentence about stormwater runoff will not flow onto adjoining properties and incorporating that somewhere else in the ordinance.
Yes.
Okay,
Motion.
we have a motion by Lee. Is there any public comment online? Seeing none. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Michael. Clerk, please call the vote.
Board Member Rich,
Yes.
Chair Strom,
Yes.
Board Member De La Vega,
Yes.
Board Member Herbach,
Yes.
Vice Chair Roberts.
Yes.
Great. Moving right along, ordinance number 2454-20, an ordinance of the city of Stewart amending section 2.04.00 of the Land Development Code entitled Area Impervious Surface Setback and Height Requirements of Chapter 2. Staff.
Thank you, Steve Mayer, Development Department. The ordinance 2454-2020 is a land development code amendment which addresses residential lot size, width, and setbacks for R2 and R3 zoning districts. And it is a staff-initiated project to encourage infill development. The ordinance of the City of Stewart, amending section 2.0400 of the Land Development Code entitled Area Impervious Surface Setback and Height Requirements of Chapter 2, Table 5, entitled Residential Area Impervious Surface Coverage Setbacks and Height Requirements, and section 2.0402 of the Land Development Code entitled Supplemental Area Requirements, in respect of standards for lot size, lot width, and building setbacks for R2 and R3 zoning districts. Now, the effect of the text amendments on the existing lots are that the ordinance will affect every R2 and R3 lot and the future subdivision, redevelopment, or development of those properties. However, lots with existing duplex and non-residential properties will not be affected by the change. It's primarily for single family that where there's the large change. There is also some setback clarifications that staff has added in regards to duplex and townhomes in R2 and R3. No lots will be made non-conforming by this change. These are the areas on our map and the locations of the R2 district. It's in this type of green color. These are our most of these two areas, one here and one there, Fisherman's Village, and they are duplex areas that are already built. There are some duplex area right here with some existing duplexes, but primarily the R2 areas that we're believing that the infill would be utilized would be this area of Stipton, where you have single family and some duplexes, and then also potentially here in that area, there are single family lots already at 90 feet. So in order to subdivide those properties, people would actually have to buy the property next door, or actually maybe even 3 lots to get them to subdivide. So it doesn't seem reasonable or feasible. And then in the in the R3 districts, you see there is more areas. A lot of those areas are either not PUDs, but they're existing multi-family residential areas. There are some areas such as in here, and of course, St. Lucie Crescent and North, that's not, sorry, and Osceola, Ocean, and between Ocean and Osceola that are R3. But in many respects, especially in this area and in this northern area of St. Lucie Crescent, there's some commercial actually that's more than likely there. So we don't necessarily anticipate this being used. However, if people wanted to use single family in some of these as redevelopment areas, it could be beneficial for them. Now, looking at the existing lot area width and setback regulations, the columns in yellow that I've bordered in yellow are the ones that are being modified or request to be modified, and the areas that are shaded in yellow are those minimum lot areas, width, and setbacks that we are either clarifying or changing. Let me show you the changes. For the R2 single family, we request that the minimum lot area be changed from 6,000 square feet to 5,000 square feet, and also that the minimum lot width change from 60 to 50. Allowing 50-foot lots would be, first of all, in compliance with the comprehensive plan density of the R2 or even in residential low areas, which allow 8.7 units per acre for single family. And also would be in compliance with very many of the original platted areas, which I have submitted to you in the agenda packet, I believe 8 prominent plats, which show the historic platting of many of these properties being 50 feet. Also for R3, we recommend from 6,000 to 4,356, which represents an area that is 10 units per acre. And 10 units per acre for residential, for R3 is the density in the comprehensive plan for that corresponding land use of residential high density. Also, minimum lot width would be from, again, 60 to 50, allowing for that 50-foot lot width. And in this case, we also recommend lowering the side setback from 8 feet to 5 feet, since we will have 50-foot lots. We do believe 5 feet would be more in keeping with the smaller lots in R3. Now, there are some other clarifications which you see actually by note or notation. They are regarding R2 and R3 two-family and multifamily, and it regards something that we have noticed, and it's just that it's something that should probably have been there regarding two-family. If it's 75 foot and that they are consist of a duplex, that would be a total width of both of those units, not having to, they wouldn't have to have 75 for each of the duplex units, but rather combined. It's not explicit in the code, but we'd like to make that clarification. Same thing with R3, two-family or duplex. And then for the setbacks, what's not clear is that it does not show what a zero lot line setback would be. It has a 10-foot side setback for R2. However, in that devising lot or zero lot line, it should state a note at least that it would be a zero setback on that side. Just a matter of clarification that we thought we would change, make clear at this time. So staff recommends approval to move forward with those changes. There is also a clarification of another section of code which states, and that's in the supplemental districts, supplementary standards, that the minimum lot would be 60 feet and 6,000, and we are changing that minimum lot to 50 feet and 5,000. So we're changing it, recommending changing it that to be consistent. So staff's would rest their presentation and would like to hear comments from the board.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Any board comment? Lee, you wanna go ahead?
Sure. So if we can go back to your table 5.
Mhm.
Yeah. So my first question is, as far as inventory goes, for the R2 and the R3 inventory, do we know how many infill lots we have, and do we know how many more this opens up? Do we have any data on that? By making these reductions, do we know?
Well, the easier question would be how many properties are affected. I don't know that offhand.
Okay.
We could get that.
I think that
usually.
might, not so much for us, but I think when it goes to the city commission, that would be something that
Sure.
might be of value to know that with the existing standards, we have this many property owners that would be able to benefit from infill.
Right.
But by changing these standards, we would add X number or whatever that number is.
Actually, to answer your question, I apologize. I thought in R2 there are 309 parcels.
But is that 309
Individual
parcels that are
lots.
infill parcels available for development?
Those are 309 existing R2 zoning parcels.
Yeah.
But we do not know if they are
Right.
going to be logically split to, we don't,
Right.
available.
Right. So,
That
but I
would
think
be
that's
much less.
important to note. I mean, I think that as we're looking at infill, it's important to say that out of the 309, there may be 120 that are infill. And right now, with the code, the way that it stands, of those 120, only maybe 100 of them would be able to be utilized. But by making this change, we would add 10% or we would add 20 more, whatever the numbers come out to be, because I think that shows actual numbers of how you're really trying to address infill, or whether it doesn't do anything, that might be the other thing. I also had a question of under R2 for your minimum side. So initially your minimum lot width was 60 feet wide, and at 15 feet, that meant that your width of your building was going to be 45 feet. But by not changing that 7.5 on the R2 minimum side, I've now taken my 45-foot wide place and reduced it to 35. So I'm thinking that maybe you need to do some kind of adjustment on that, because even before, I think you need to, I don't know what that number is, but I think going from 45 to 35 is a big.
Yeah. We actually had that conversation at staff about 10 minutes before this meeting.
Okay.
And so we looked at that, and it's your point taken. What we were considering at a staff level is that could come down to 5 feet, but be limited to single-story building only. Anything above 1 story would go to 7.5.
Right, because the other in the R3, when you're going from 60 feet with a 16 feet, it means that the width of your building is 44.
Yeah.
And with this change going from 50 to 10 feet, 5 on each side, you're going to 40.
Yes.
Which I think that's understandable. So
reasonable.
that's a 10% reduction, but the other one I think is a little bit extreme.
Yes.
And that's all I had.
Thanks, Lee. Anybody have any other comments? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
So if I make a motion, how do you want me to handle the 7.5?
You know what? How do I raise my hand? Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, Christina, we can hear you.
Okay, I have to recuse myself because this is my neighborhood and it directly affects me. Right? So isn't that the right thing to do?
Hold on one second.
We did actually anticipate this, and it turns out that there's some Attorney General opinions specifically on point. Since this is general zoning, the Attorney General has opined that it isn't a direct conflict because it's general zoning. If it was actually your house that we were addressing,
Okay.
yes, you would have to. But just like anything else, every decision the board makes has some kind of financial impact and would create a conflict. As a result, the Attorney General said when it's general zoning, it is not a conflict. So you do actually have the right to vote on it.
But Mike, if I did own an R2 lot
She does.
I do.
that is benefiting from the 6,000 to 5,000?
I do.
General zoning. For example, if you were a city commissioner or a board member and the city commission increased the density to 5 stories, anybody that owned anything that could have 5 stories on it wouldn't be able to vote. And they say that that's general zoning. And as a result, general zoning doesn't have the conflict.
So do you fill out the
You don't have the B4 because, for example, let's take it a
disclosure?
step further. Let's say if it wasn't an R2, but it was R3 and it was making R3 more restrictive that somehow made R2 more valuable. Would that in effect create the zoning? Yes, because the same thing. Or if you said that, so each, whatever zoning you do has an impact on the other zoning, whether it makes it go up in value or down in value, doesn't matter. That's not the conflict. The conflict is a financial impact. And so what the Attorney General took the position is that if it's general zoning and it's not a direct impact on you, like for example, I have no idea by saying this, Christina, but if Ms. De La Vega was planning to do a lot split and take advantage of this and do whatever it is she was planning to do, it still wouldn't be a conflict unless she was here asking for an exception. This is a general zoning across the board for everyone. And as a result, she doesn't have the exception. And I'll send you guys the Attorney General opinion sometime in the next couple of days, just to make sure you follow up on it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So how do you want me to handle the 7.5 and the R2 minimum side?
Well, I think the motion will be to approve, subject to the setback for R2 single family being 5 feet for one-story buildings only. Other construction within R2 single family would need 7.5.
Is it single story on R3 with the 5 foot?
That's if you want to take it that far, then
I mean,
it would mean,
what does staff think about that? If I'm going 5
it would
feet,
make
should I be
it would make,
a single story if I'm 5 feet?
what do we have now?
You're going from 8 to 5.
I think it's more reasonable that the 5 feet in R3 is for the whole thing. In R2, I think we are reducing 7.5 in an area where,
Do you think, or?
yeah.
Or once you're 5 feet from the property line, should you be one story? Meaning that if I'm more than 5 feet from the property line, I could be asking you to be 2-story. Let's say I managed to build something that's, do you understand what I'm asking you?
Yes.
But if I'm utilizing the 5 feet, if I'm pushing up against the 5 feet, no matter what I'm in, should I be utilizing the 5 feet with a 1-story building, whether I'm in R2 or R3? And if I'm not utilizing the 5 feet,
And that would be consistent with,
then I would be consistent with, does that
Yeah.
logic follow?
that's logic.
But then how do you address, I mean, so then do you have a different number for things that are 2-story?
No, I'd rather not get into that complexity. One of the biggest reasons that this has come forward is that the way the code is written now actually discriminates against single family development
Correct.
in the city. It actually looks more in favor to multifamily. So in the R2 and R3 zoning districts,
So let's
you
say,
might see more single family.
so let's say Steve and I both own an R2 lot, and he goes to 5 feet from the side property line, so he's limited to 1-story. And I do mine 6 feet from the property line, then am I no longer limited to the 1-story? Or
Right, you can build 2-stories.
do you understand what I'm,
So it would only be,
only if I'm pushing up against the 5 feet, okay. Got it, I'm ready for a motion then.
Okay.
I move approval with an adjustment to the R2 single-family minimum side being reduced to 5 feet and a qualification for both of those 5 feet, that those are for single-family.
Okay. Thank you for your motion.
Story.
Do we have any?
Single story.
Single story. Do we have any public comment? Seeing none, do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Clerk, will you please call the vote?
Board Member Herbach,
Yes.
Board Member De La Vega,
Yes.
Vice Chair Roberts,
Yes.
Chair Strom,
Yes.
Board Member Rich,
Yes.
Okay, our final agenda item, ordinance 2422-2020, is an ordinance of the City of Stewart amending Article 5 of the Code of Ordinances entitled Communications Facilities in the Public Right-of-Way. Staff, will you please discuss?
Yes, Stephen Mayer for the record. This is actually a Code of Ordinance amendment. It's Ordinance 2422-2020. It's a wireless communication towers specific to the public rights-of-way. It's an ordinance of the City of Stewart, Florida, amending Article 5 of the Code of Ordinances entitled Communication Facilities in the Public Right-of-Way in respect of standards for the provision of regulating the replacement and maintenance of new and existing wireless communication towers in the public right-of-way. Provides appeal of conflicting ordinance severability codification. Effective date. The intention of the ordinance is that we know that 5G technology is the latest trend in wireless communications. The system requires telecommunication providers to install systems in denser network patterns and closer to the end users and within existing public right-of-ways is how the state has drafted the law. The city is currently processing and permitting co-location of 5G towers in the public rights-of-way at this time, and we have been. We have requested the providers attempt to camouflage the equipment. However, at this time, we do not have a current code to specifically address their permits. Although the city is restricted by the Advanced Wireless Infrastructure Deployment Act of 2017 and recent amendments, most recently in 2019, we do have some ability to provide code for aesthetics and also limited arrangements of how to locate them. Now, due to the passage of the Act and other technological changes to the wireless communication industry, the city proposes to amend its current cell tower regulations to ensure that they comply with the new law, and properly address new technologies that are seeking to occupy public rights-of-way. Staff utilized the wireless communication ordinance from Bonita Springs, which was actually patented off our existing cell tower regulations. It was in our Code of Ordinances, so it was very easy to match up the sections and how they align. So before I get into that, I do want to mention that according to Florida statutes 337.401, that local governments may not charge applicants to register or renew small wireless facilities in the right-of-way, prohibit, regulate, or charge for co-location of facilities in the right-of-way, or for the installation, maintenance, modification, operation, or replacement of utility poles used for co-location of the small wireless facilities. Require the placement of small wireless facilities in any specific utility pole or category of poles, or require multiple antennas systems on a single pole. Directly or indirectly require an applicant to perform services unrelated to the co-location for which the approval is sought, such as in-kind contributions to the city. Require an applicant to provide more information to obtain a permit that is necessary to demonstrate the applicant's compliance with applicable codes for placement of small wireless facilities in the locations identified by the application. We're not allowed to limit the placement of small wireless facilities by minimum separation distances. We're not allowed to require a demonstration that co-location of a small wireless facility on an existing structure is not legally or technically possible as a condition for granting a permit for co-locating of small wireless facilities. Requiring compliance with the city's regulations regarding the placement of small wireless facilities or a new utility pole used to support small wireless facilities in rights-of-way under the control of FDOT, unless the authority has received a delegation from the department for the location of small wireless facility or utility poles, or require such compliance as a condition to receive a permit that is ancillary to the permit for co-location of a small wireless facility, including electrical permit. We're not allowed to require a meeting before filing an application or direct or indirect public notification for the placement of communications in the right-of-way, limiting the size of the configuration of the small wireless facility or its components, prohibit the installation of new utility pole used to support the co-location of wireless facilities, requiring any component of the small wireless facility to be placed underground, except in areas where all utilities of the right of way are required to place underground. And then institute either expressly or de facto a moratorium in zoning in progress or other mechanisms that would prohibit or delay the filing, receiving, processing of the applications, etc. So what are we allowed to regulate? And unfortunately,
Good job, Steve.
yeah, thank you, Christine. So local governments may require that a new utility pole that replaces an existing utility pole be of substantially similar design, material, and color. That reasonable spacing requirements, the term reasonable spacing requirements concerning the location of a ground-mounted component of a small wireless facility which does not exceed 15 feet from the associated support structure, or a small wireless facility to meet reasonable locational context, color, camouflage, and concealment requirements, subject to some certain limitations in 337401. A new utility pole used to support small wireless facilities to meet reasonable locational context, color, and material of the predominant utility pole type and the proposed location of the new utility pole. So in essence, that it looks similar to the other poles. And then we may limit the height of small wireless facilities to 10 feet above the utility pole or structure upon which the small wireless facility is co-located, unless waived by the local government. And there are some rules on that. But the summary of there's a lot of code in there actually, and I have to apologize for it. But there's a lot of code to digest and look through. And in summary, what you might notice all of that language doing is that in section 36.132 in particular, we saw some really good additional detail that are required in the application for a permit to place one in a right of way, and that also included a detailed waiver process that could happen through the city management, city manager. And so we did take all of those application requirements that were in the Bonita Springs application. We put those into ours. We feel like there was a lot of good information that it was asking for, that we can at least make an educated decision on each permit. The added regulations also in 36.132 are on the placement and maintenance of communication facilities. It includes the removal of facilities, the undergrounding of them, above ground placement, new utility poles, and replacement poles. The city proposes locational context regulations, which is the only thing we can do, and that allows the city to investigate options that are available by reasonably locating the proposed communication towers to either safe or more reasonable locations due to very specific causes shown in the regulations that we're allowed to do. There are also regulations that provide safety and minimal interference with the right-of-way itself, and including the repair of damaged right-of-way due to the construction of the facilities. So they include coordination of plans, documents, encouraging the co-location and joint use, and they demonstrate, and that they require a demonstration of maintenance of traffic, which we thought was very important. Section 36.133 adds regulations regarding the height and where and when the city may deny a proposed co-location of small wireless facilities, which are very rare indeed. But there's at least some code that we can fall back on if we do, or if we are able to see a permit that doesn't make sense. So this ends the staff presentation of the ordinance. We were happy to discuss with you your comments.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Do you have any board comment? Lee,
Okay, you ready for me? You want me to go first?
go first.
All right.
Ready.
Okay, so let's start on page 126 of 242. That whole section talks about the city manager handling the waiver. Is that
Okay?
what we would really want to do? I mean, I don't know if that's because this was lifted from somewhere and maybe that's how they handle it in other places, but that struck me as strange as to,
We could add or designee.
or designee
Yes.
probably would be. Okay. Okay, that's number one. Let's see, number two. I did notice the shroud or wrap, but I'm not gonna talk about that. Page 133 of 242. Number 19 talks about you can't interfere with the signals or facilities of any other of our police, blah, 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 et cetera, or any other communication services provider. So whose responsibility is that? And the reason I say that is because my brother worked for Loral for a while, which sent satellites into space, and they had a problem once where they were using the same frequency as another satellite they went up next to, which rendered a useless because it was up there and then they couldn't use it. So I'm just wondering whose responsibility that is, or whose.
NASA, yeah. I think it would be NASA.
Yeah,
I guess, because obviously we would be signing off to say you're not interfering with our police, you're not interfering with,
Sure.
but I think it should be clear that as far as interfering with somebody else's,
Right.
I think that there should be some clarification.
Limited to public systems. Public city.
Well, I don't mind them not having to,
By FCC.
It's controlled by FCC, so we have had this happen before, and I'm sorry, I'm not on the microphone. And it's FCC will resolve the issue between the frequency.
okay, so we don't have to worry about that, thanks. Abandonment and removal. So if somebody abandons, can we add language that says if the structure is abandoned,
Mm-hmm.
that we have the right to remove it?
Okay.
Instead of it just being like there forever because we don't, it's in our right of way. So, we don't have permission to remove it because it's, but I think there should be some procedure as far as goes with abandonment.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I'm not done. In your list of,
Yeah. How long did it?
in your list of things that were what we were allowed to do and what we weren't allowed to do.
Judge Lee, isn't removal addressed in L on page 137? It says it's covered by existing state law.
137,
Removal or relocation at the direction of the city of a registrant's communication facility in the public shall be governed by the provisions of Florida statute, blah, blah, blah.
I don't know, do you know what this is, you guys?
Page 137L,
337, 403, 404?
correct? Just, I don't know if that would supersede anything they came up with themselves.
I'm concerned mostly with abandonment. I mean, I know that a lot of times these things on private property, I know it happens. Somebody puts up something, they get a land lease and they put up a tower and they put up some communication thing. And then after so many years, they abandon it. But it's become a problem with property I know about in South Carolina. It's been abandoned. The land lease is going for 50 years. The private landowner has a code enforcement problem because of the abandoned structure. Yet the owner has no recourse to go against the guy because the guy's long since abandoned it. I mean, I think that's the scenario that I'm looking at, is that if somebody abandons something, if we don't have anything codified that says what we can do in the case of an abandonment, that,
No, I agree with Lee. I think that's a very sensible concern. I was just pointing out to staff.
yeah, I see where
It-
you've got it there in
Yeah.
L,
It might be covered already.
but I think you need to add some abandonment language. Hang on. Oh, back to your numbers that you had before. So you're what you can do and what you can't do in your presentation?
Right.
So what you can do, under the what you can do's in number 5, you're allowed to, I'll wait till you find it. Number 5 of what you can do. No, not that 5. Or wait, let's see.
This is what we can do.
What you can do. Number 5, so you can't, it's the height of the tallest existing utility pole. So does that mean that we just screwed ourselves when we got all those really tall poles on US 1 that are like way up there in the sky, like we live in a place where there's high risers?
I think the answer is yes.
Is that date relating to the
July 1st. That's from, not from the ordinance, that's from the piece of state.
So I'm not sure if somebody could just for curiosity, I don't remember, time goes by really fast when you get old. So I don't know whether those great big tall poles that are out there were before July of 2017. They probably were, but
But it's 500 feet from the proposed location.
They're already going up.
Oh, I know.
And the companies are not trying to offend the neighborhoods. They're actually being fairly reasonable to the standards of the neighborhood. None of them have come in and said to us, we want a 40-foot pole. But you're right, that is a good issue, and I'll look into it, but I don't know the answer. And you also look at the same right. Tallest pole is the same right. Right.
yeah,
So US 1 is a different standard than neighborhood.
yeah. So I think that needs to be. So you also said something about small wireless facilities. You can limit placement based on the minimum separation distance, but you can or you can't.
Not,
In one place you couldn't, but then,
no, it's not a separation distance. It's a, they're using the term reasonable locational context. The distance is actually not to exceed 15 feet from the associated support structure is the reasonable spacing requirement. Not between the systems, not between the wireless poles
so that's what we
themselves.
can regulate, but is
This
there
is what we
something under
can.
the what we can't regulate that
Yeah.
said something about limiting?
Oh yeah, there was something that we can't regulate, and that's having a separation between the two. So limit the placement of small wireless facilities with minimum separation distances from each other. We can't do that.
So we can't, but I'll let you go on, but I think I saw something in the small limited, in the small ones where you could, but
Okay.
we're in what you wrote, you could, but go on to somebody else, I'll be looking.
Okay, thanks, Lynn.
Okay, Mike, do you have anything?
Yeah, I think I just want to talk a little bit about what I think is going on here. I've been involved with the cell tower wireless business, putting up cell towers net for about 30 years. I think what we're doing here is we're getting everything in order. I think it's a good thing for driverless cars. And driverless cars, from my understanding, will be on 6 gigahertz, not 5, but it's the same system. The way I can relate that is the old days of AM radio, you could drive for 100 miles and listen to the same station because it was low frequency. When stereos came out, it was higher frequency, 89 rather than 9.2 was 85.2. And that didn't carry as far, maybe 30 miles. Our cell phones are what they call line of sight. If you could take out the walls and see the tower, you can talk to it. But if there's something in the way, you're not going to talk to it because that's that's 3 gigahertz and 4 gigahertz. 6 gigahertz is coming on the 5 gigahertz thing because that's what driverless cars work on. They don't have tall antennas, but the gigahertz is so much higher that you need a tower, or not a tower, but a light pole or anything with a 3-foot antenna, maybe every block or 2 blocks. Just think of it going down I-95, and if the driverless car locked on a tower, a cell they call it, where it goes over, let's say, Citrus Boulevard, and then you lose it when you go down the road out out towards 714. Your car's not going to go anywhere. So you have to have these towers almost every other block that keep looking for a cell. A cell is just a circle, and you have to be in that circle. So I think that's what we're talking about here. It says wireless, small wireless. That's what it is. It's not a big tower anymore. It's just a 3-foot antenna on a light pole. That will also enhance our computer skills, because our computers, because we could talk to the pole outside rather than have all this stuff in our house. That's just a layman's way of telling the people who are interested how this is going to work. Also, that's one of the reasons we now have an ordinance for recharging stations, because that's where it's going. Anyway, that's just my thoughts on it. I have a couple other thoughts or suggestions here. Did we take page 123 of 242 about the date midway down? It says, whereas the Land Planning Agency reviewed the proposed amendments on the Code of Ordinances at a public hearing on October 6th, 2020. It should be October 8th.
Thank you.
Somebody hit the wrong button, I guess.
That say local planning?
The other, and it's just a technicality, on page 129, the bottom line, the bottom sentence, says the use of wooden poles. I think more correctly it'd be called timbers. The industry uses timbers. Wood is a processed material. It could be wood or timbers. I'm not really adamant about either way, but I think that more accurately describes it.
So would it be wooden timbers or just just timbers, use of timbers?
You could say timber or wood, or just timbers. Timbers is what they use out in the field. They don't use wood. They don't go to, usually they don't. It's just a minor thing. The last thing I have is on page 135, paragraph 27. Placement of, oh, I drove through it. I guess it's a pole, I can't read it, I blocked it out, of a scenic or gateway corridor. About 20 years ago, we passed or made an ordinance called Vistas. And I'm reading from that ordinance, I pulled it up. The ordinance 2303, 2015, 2915. It says Vista. Vista means a visual corridor at ground level with an unobstructed view from any public right-of-way to the St. Lucie River or its tributaries such as Haney Creek or Fraser Creek. So I think I would like to have Vista put in there too, because that's what we call it in the city of Stewart, the Vista.
Okay, yeah, we will make that more consistent with how our comp plan is. So Vista is recommended. Thank you.
There's not going to be any big tall cell towers anymore. They're going to be on light poles as you go down US 1.
Thanks, Mike. Lee, do you remember where you left off?
No, but I found.
Okay, I'll see you. Campbell or Christina, do you have anything?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
No, no.
Okay.
So page 138 and 139, 138, which is the old black language under section 33-133. Number 1 says, keep going down a little bit. Says the wireless facility shall not extend more than 20 feet above the highest point of the vertical structure. But is it 20 feet or 10 feet?
We would be 10, so we want to
So
change
does
it
that need to be 10,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay, hang on, I had one more thing. There's a, on page 130, letter F. Letter F, where it's you're prohibiting in a location where facilities are placed underground. We're not talking about utilities. We're talking about the facility. What are we talking about?
Well, those could be,
Talking about the
quite frankly,
building?
well, it could be any public facilities such as stormwater facilities or
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. All right,
That's it?
that's it.
Great. Okay. Do we have a motion?
I move approval with the following 3 things. On page 126, adding or designee to the city manager language. On page 138, changing the 20 feet to 10 feet. And the third thing, addressing abandonment, adding something that has to do with abandonment.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there any public comment?
Did we get the things I talked about?
Which things did you talk about? I wasn't paying
Well, the
attention to you.
dates and,
On page 135, we want to add Vista. And you wanted to add the word timber instead of wood, or replace it?
wood timber is fine.
Okay,
Wood timber. And
So-
then on page 123, the date change.
From 6 to 8, October 8th.
123, the date, and call it local planning instead of land planning.
Thank
And
thanks, Mike.
so then my motion is expanded to add the word Vista on page 135, to add the word
This-
timber,
Wood timber, yeah.
wood timber. And then number 6 on page 123 to correct the date and call it local instead of land. There.
Okay, we have an amended motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Did I ask public comment? I did, and there was none. Clerk, please call the vote.
Board Member Rich,
Yes.
Vice Chair Robert,
Yes.
Board Member Herbach,
Yes.
Chair Strom,
Yes,
Board Member Della Vega.
Yes.
great. Thank you, guys. Thank you, staff. Appreciate it.
So I had one more comment. I just wanted to remind everybody that since this is the month of October, that we're 2 meetings away from December where we will be having our,
We are planning, Lee.
just so that somebody's
yes.
planning that.
It's gonna be,
Okay.
it's gonna be.
Planning what?
The pizza party.
Oh,
What?
Oh, the pizza party.
spicy.
And if I could-
Really?
If I could just chime in real fast, I went ahead and pulled up the Commission on Ethics and quickly found one. There's many of them. In this particular case, it was a Punta Gorda situation. A member of a city council is not presented with a voting conflict requiring her abstention in compliance with section 112.3143, Florida statutes regarding measures concerning changes to the city's land development regulations related to the city center zoning district wherein herself and her spouse own property. Under these circumstances, the size of the class affected properties is sufficiently large that any gain or loss to the council member and his or her spouse is not special. And then at the bottom of it, it's a pretty long article, but at the bottom, they give some examples, and they said, we found no voting conflict of interest would be created where a member of a city county planning commission to vote on a down zoning proposal encompassing the neighborhood in which he lived, where the proposal would have down zoned over 700 lots in the neighborhood owned by approximately 560 persons. Similarly, we advised that a town commission and zoning board would not be prohibited from voting on rezoning of a mobile home park in which the commissioner lived, where the town consisted of 250 residents, of whom approximately 90% lived in that mobile home park. In the instant matter, the council member and her husband owned 6 lots comprising of 0.65 acres located within a zoning district which contains 600 and 130
Sorry.
total acres.
Sorry.
I know it's interesting, but I have to do it. Of developable land. Thus, the official's ownership interest represents less than 1% of the total number of platted lots and less than 1/2 of 1% of the total developable land within the city center, and as a result, doesn't qualify as a special private gain. There's many others that talk about it, but basically, general zoning is not a conflict. Thank you. And
Thanks,
whatever
Mike.
happened during that was not me.
For the record.
Zoom bomb.
Do we have a motion to adjourn? Right.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I,
Yes.